Welcome back to my channel, it's Jasmine from Bumblefly, and today's video will be celebrating World Houseplant Week, which starts on the 11th of January this month. To celebrate this, I have digitally painted one of my plants, my lovely Olivia. Olivia is a Phalaenopsis orchid, and she is white and purple, and she's got a yellow spot in the middle. For the sake of artistic license, I have modified the colours when I do digitally paint her, but that being said, let's get right into the speed paint.
Alright, voiceover Jazzy here. The first thing I'm going to do is put up some photos of Olivia on the screen so you can see what she looks like and what I'm working with. I also have other plants other than Olivia. I have a lot of other plants as you saw at the start of my video. And I'm also looking after a few plants for my friends while they're on holiday, so stay tuned to the end of the video to see my houseplant tour. First thing I'm doing is choosing a background color. I've gone for an orange, and I've decided to create a bit of dynamic by putting the bottom corner as slightly red. Next thing I want to do is I want to draw a grid, so using the drawing guide, I'm just looking there and using it to draw my grid. I'm doing this in a really light pink orange color. And as you see, you can resize the grid to whatever you want. I'm going to start sketching the pot now, and I'm going to do every single element of the pot on a different layer. This just makes it easier to shade later. When I'm shading this, I am working from a medium grey to a darker grey, and I will also hit it with some highlights to make that form pop. I'm using a sort of hemp textured brush to create the soil, and on top I'll have these hatches, and this just imitates the peat moss which orchids naturally are planted in. Or at least when you buy them at the store, they're planted in this. I'm just resizing it so it fits nicer in the third of my page, going by rule of thirds. And the next thing I'm gonna do is start to sketch my orchid. The box you see there is just a guide for me to know how high I want my leaves to be. So I'm starting to draw my leaves now. And they're sort of almond-y shaped, or like sort of peanut-shaped leaves. And some of them have little curves, so they curve up and round. And there's this third one on the bottom. I'm trying to do an odd number of leaves so it looks a bit more natural and a bit more sporadic and organic. As you can see, I have been naming my layers. This helps keep everything organized. And here I am working on the aerial roots. I did find that I used a couple of reference photos from the internet just to help me make sure that, as well as looking at Olivia, I'm also getting the best proportions that I could get when I'm drawing this, of course. So here I am, making sure every leaf has its own separate layer. For me, this is personally the best way to shade, as it avoids me messing up my other elements. I work on one leaf at a time, and I'm just going to go in with a nice dark color. And once I do this for all of the leaves, you'll see that I'll come in with a slightly darker color and also with a highlight. Alright, now we're working on the aerial roots. This is going to be a very similar process. Make sure that you've got your layers, or, well, these didn't really need to be in layers because I could just alpha lock these and then just shade right over it, but it is up to you depending on where your aerial roots are. And for these, I'm using a slightly yellow toned green, and I'm going in with a slightly orangey color just to add some shade, and it also adds a bit more dimension so you're not using the exact same shade of green every single time. I'm going to make a small study of an orchid head-on, face-on, front view on the top corner of my page just so I can get the gist of what the form is like of an orchid. Once I've done this, I will be looking at Olivia and drawing these orchids where I want them to go, and this will pay attention to proportions and the way the petals are angled, and you can just refer back to your initial study to figure out how big these petals should be when you turn them sideways or you look at them, just to make sure that they're correct in proportion and size. I think the hardest bit of sketching the orchids was the bottom petals. That small little nub in the middle, it just looks a bit strange when you first draw it. But if you draw all of them exactly the same, with the same elements and the same forms, then it comes together in the end, and then that's all you really need. So I think I ended up drawing maybe like 7 or 8 orchids all together, and they're all piled on top of each other. I'm also drawing in the stems as I go. As you see, I've put a few little smaller bulbs right at the end, at the tip, where they would normally form. This just adds a bit of extra pizzazz. It's not, it's not just orchids. You have the entire stem, the orchid, the bulbs. So here I am working on the second branch. The way I created these stems was looking at them and realizing that they were sausage shaped. So I drew a lot of small, thin sausages right on top of each other, and these just create the stem. When you do shade them later, just make sure you make the form of these super round and cylindrical, just so you can tell that these are the nodes of the flower rather than actual sausages. So when you do your petals, make sure you've chosen your colors first. I ended up choosing a very light lilac as well as a slightly more saturated purple, and I did use a quite light yellow as well as white for some highlights. Now I've drawn every petal on a different layer as I have done with the leaves, then I shade these, and then when I do finish shading my entire orchid and painting it, I do merge these onto one single layer, so one layer is one orchid. If you do this, it does make it easier as you'll have one orchid for every single orchid rather than 5 petal layers for each orchid and then times that by how many orchids you have. So if it's 5 layers times 9 orchids, you'll probably have like 45 layers, and that's kind of confusing. So just make sure to keep merging your orchids once you're done doing each one. The middle of my orchids are yellow, so that's what I've painted them as, and I've also made the yellow go onto the purple layers, and this just creates this really cool glow effect, especially if you blend it into the purple layer, and so that's what I have gone for, and I think it looks really good. Alright, final stretch. We're now onto the last little branches, and I'm going to draw these bulbs on the end of these orchids, and these are going to be done in a yellow-green color to match the aerial roots. It just creates some links between the piece, so even if it is the same, it's only small elements which are the same which make the piece look overall more cohesive. The way I'm shading these bulbs is I'm using a black on a different separate layer. I'm putting this on a clipping layer, and once I've created these shadings, I'm going to lower the opacity, and this creates a slightly more muted tone green for coloring and shading these, rather than me going and picking out a green myself. Okay, so this is the end of this video, but off camera I did add some abstract shapes into my background. I did this in a mustard yellow just to complement the yellow tones in the piece, and I will show you some photos of that now. I'm actually super happy with this. It took me about 2 hours and 15 minutes to actually fully digitally paint this, so yeah, I'm pretty proud. And I do love that it's showcasing my plant, one of my favorite plants and one of my first plants. Alright, I promised I would do a little plant tour. I do have some plants that belong to my roommate and my neighbor who have given me their plants to look after, so I will show you them as well, but I will point out which ones are mine and which ones are theirs. So first off, we have Taffy. She's called Taffeta, and she is a Magdalena magnifica. She is a sort of hybrid of an orchid, and she comes from the Philippines. I'm kind of surprised that they can sell these houseplants here when they're so tropical. Now the next plant we have here, I'm not actually sure what this one is. I've been calling it Spiky, and this actually belongs to my neighbor. Next plant is the much beloved Monstera Deliciosos, you can see here with those little cool holy leaves. Next we have a mother-in-law's tongue because it's super sharp. This is also my neighbor's. Then we have a collection of succulents and cacti. The succulent is mine, he's called Martin King, and these two cacti belong to my roommate. This is actually a fake flower which is glued to the top of it, which I realized. I'm not sure how I'm going to tell my roommate that. And the last plant we have on my windowsill is a Croton Petra variegata, and she is actually native to where I am from, which is Malaysia. You can also find these in Indonesia and probably Thailand too. And they have beautiful variegated leaves that are green, yellow, and red, as you can see on this leaf here. And they're absolutely gorgeous. I recently got her and she's actually already root bound, so I will need to change her pot soon, but for now she looks absolutely beautiful. On my work table here, I've got two plants currently. The first one is my beautiful pancake plant or Chinese money plant. This is Gwendolyn and she's absolutely adorable. She's so small, so cute, and she's been growing so fast for me, which is amazing. And I do love her very, very dearly. And this plant here is a cheesecake plant, Swiss cheese plant, another type of Monstera. This is also my neighbor's, and it's an absolutely gorgeous plant with these gorgeous leaves, similar to my Monstera over here, just a different hybrid, different breed, different species. Not sure how it works, but Very, very beautiful plant, super viney. He's super long and he's been growing quite well. Oh dear, there's a yellow leaf, but we can trim that up later. My last nook of plants is where I do my openings for this video. The plant we have here, she's called Isabella. She is also my roommate's or my neighbor's plant, and she is a silver queen plant. She's absolutely beautiful with these silver variegations in the middle. There's also a silver bay plant where the silver just runs right in the middle instead of going out all the way to the edges, but also very, very beautiful, very, very, very fast growing. She's so big and fluffy, I love it. Then over here, you've met her before. This is my very beautiful Olivia. She lives over here. Her beautiful petals. And then over here, last plant. This is also my neighbor's. This is a tropical fern. I'm not entirely sure what tropical fern, but it's absolutely darling and gorgeous. I do need to wipe him down. But he grows super fast and he grows in this lava stone. So you just fill it up with water and it takes as much water as it needs. You don't really need to bother about overwatering it, but you can't underwater it, that's the thing. Very fun, also a very fluffy plant. And that is my house plant tour completed. I hope you enjoyed that.
I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for joining me today, and I'll see you next time.